Over here, Eric. Sorry, sir. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. We have some great news to report out about Minneapolis yet again, in that we are now into the 13th year over $1 billion in construction permits. This is a very big deal for our city because it shows a kind of consistency that world-class cities around the world are experiencing when things are going well. There are more than a few naysayers about Minneapolis over the last few years, but what this shows and what these numbers show is that we are on the right track. More than a decade above $1 billion in construction permits. Specifically this year, we're at $1.5 billion. This construction ranges everything from housing to commercial, new hospitals, conversions from market affordable housing, conversions from commercial to affordable housing. This is the kind of flexibility that we want to see in our city, and this kind of growth and investment is indicative of a city that's on the right track, and that is exactly what we are. Over the last 8 to 10 years, there has been a real serious focus as well on supply of housing. And while I won't get into the specifics of affordable housing, which we're also setting records on, I will tell you that this work around generating supply is working. It's helping to keep down rents. It's helping for more people to be able to live in a world-class city that is Minneapolis. And what these numbers show very clearly is that people want to live in Minneapolis, they want to work in Minneapolis, and the investment, they want to invest in Minneapolis. So we're very proud of this work. I want to give a huge thank you to our city staff that are doing everything possible to make sure that that investment happens easily. We're making sure that we create the canvas, and some of these developers and investors, they can build upon it. So this is the work that this is all about. I'm really proud of this progress. And again, it's happening across the city, whether it's Central, West Broadway, East Lake, Phillips neighborhood, or on the north side. It's happening in most every single neighborhood. And just to highlight a few before I turn it over to our council member, Agra is one example of an affordable housing project that is for very low income. It's making sure to help people with disabilities, and it also helps out families as well, making sure that in some cases it's more than 2-bedroom units. The North Star East was a prime example of conversion from commercial to housing. Recognizing that commercial space isn't getting filled to capacity, we at the City of Minneapolis are being both innovative and flexible, shifting that commercial space to make sure that someone can now live there. And then finally, Abbott Northwestern is doubling down to expand their campus over on the south side to make sure that they have premier facilities, not just in Minnesota, but nationwide. This is the kind of work that matters. This is the kind of work that we collectively are all really proud of, and we want to keep that momentum going. Northside is seeing a ton of momentum in and of itself, and here to talk about that momentum is the council member of the 5th Ward, Jeremiah Ellison.
How's it going? Jeremiah Ellison. I represent Ward 5 here in the city of Minneapolis, and you know, we can talk about the numbers, right? The number of permits, the number of money, you know, the number of dollars going into these into our communities. But I want to talk a little bit about what I think these numbers represent. When you look at you know, economic security, right, for folks. When you look at whether it's affordable housing or a new, you know, job center, a new place where people are going to work, this is people being able to make a living. This is people being able to go somewhere to work. It's people being able to have a stable place to live. And we talk a lot at the city when we're dealing with other issues, more, you know, issues that aren't worth, you know, that are harder to celebrate, about upstream solutions. This is the upstream, right? This is how people create their futures for themselves. It's how they secure themselves in their housing. You look at North High and the reconstruction you have going on there. You look at West Broadway and the commercial space there. You look anywhere in North Minneapolis and see affordable housing being built, whether you know, whether on Glenwood or on the river, and what it represents. And we should know the numbers, and we do know the numbers. We have that here. But what it represents is that economic security, that, you know, that financial security, that job security, that housing dignity and security, and these things all lead to increased safety and those things that we love and that our constituents want to have in order to have a thriving city. And so with that, I'll pass it to our COO, Margaret Anderson Kelleher.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, City Operations Officer. And we really want to salute the businesses and others who have been investing in the city. This does not happen without this level of investment. $1.5 billion last year in 2023, representing housing, representing individual businesses, as well as nonprofits, the school district, and others. And what does it mean? It means that we're doing something right here. It means that our permitting processes that have been really reworked and we continue to get pushed to make sure that we have a one-stop shop from intake to closeout of buildings, that we are able to do that seamlessly for both our residents and our businesses. Whether you're a small business or a Fortune 500 business, we want to make sure that that process goes well. This is evidence that that process is going well. I also think that it's important to be thinking about exactly the point that both the mayor and council member Ellison made. People want to be and live in the city. And that also is a salute to the other things happening in our city. Better transit, BRT, light rail operations, all of those things make it easier, and our multimodal transportation. All of this makes it easier for people to say yes to Minneapolis. We also want to make sure that we are doing our part for the region and for the state. 2/3 of our taxes, sales, corporate income tax, actually benefit other jurisdictions in Minnesota, particularly our metro area through the long-time fiscal disparities policies, but also the rest of the state. When Minneapolis is thriving, Minnesota thrives. And that's what we're going to keep focused on here. And I want to introduce our leader of all of that community planning and economic development work, Eric Hansen, to come up and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, COO Anderson Kelleher, Eric Hansen, the CPED director. And what I'd like to talk to you about is the process and the partnerships. Minneapolis is able to announce these figures today because of the investments and the choices that the private market and individuals are making, and the city of Minneapolis is here to be that partner. The projects that were permitted in 2023 have taken a long time to get there, and we want to make sure that you have a very seamless process from the entitlements to the certificate of occupancy, whether you are a small business, a Fortune 500 company, or an individual in the city, and we will work through our development services and planning groups within CPED and align the other departments so that you can get through the zoning, land use, and building codes as seamlessly as possible in a very predictable system. We take feedback all the time, and we're continuously improving that system so that we can see that. And it's bearing out in the data where we've seen this much development this consistently over these many years. And so people are choosing to be in Minneapolis. We're very fortunate for that choice, and we'll continue to work to make sure that the process is predictable, and we have a partnership with all of the developers that come through so that when people are going out in Minneapolis, they don't have to think about fire codes. They don't have to think about if sprinklers are going to go out, because we will think about that for them. We'll work with the development community so we'll have a safe and inclusive city. So thank you. Mayor?
We'll open up to any questions you might have.
So what do you accomplish for why we continue to see this development, and how is it different from other cities that maybe are struggling in this respect?
The trajectory we've seen over these last 8 years is one of consistency. I think other cities have seen the kind of boom and bust periods that are largely dependent on inflation rates or investment, both nationally and internationally. In Minneapolis, we've set a tone and, in fact, a level of stability in terms of our markets that allows for these investments to take place year in, year out. And sure, you'll have a little bit fluctuation, 1 year $1.3 billion, the next year $2 billion. But overall, what you see is a kind of consistency that is indicative of a city that continues to grow. And that's what we want to see. We want to continue that investment into our city. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to come in and invest, whether it's, again, local investors and developers or nationwide. Our CPED team has done a really tremendous job of setting that table. But, there's also policies that we have either pushed for or prevented from happening that have allowed for that continued growth.
The Planning Commission agendas have been empty for months now. Planning Commission committee, the whole has been canceled, 10 of the last 11 times. There's not a lot coming down the pipeline right now.
Well, developers are proposing projects and that the permits are going out for construction. I think what you highlighted is indicative of what's coming in on the pipeline. And I'll let Eric Hansen talk to the specifics about this. Part of it, and I'm going to take the opportunity, is some confusion about the 2040 plan and the future in terms of the litigation that is presently underway. It's not a secret to anybody that we have a groundbreaking proposal in the 2040 plan that was instituted, has seen some positive gains from it, and is now largely left in limbo because a judge said that we can't continue to institute it. This is a big problem. It's a problem for people that are looking for affordable housing because there are more than a few projects that would not previously be allowed but for the existence of the 2040 plan. You've been at several of the press conferences for them. We have parcels that previously had a single-family home on them and now have 4 or 8 units of deeply affordable or public housing because of the 2040 plan. We have projects like Envision Homes that was literally tanked because the 2040 plan was pulled back. So part of a lack of new projects coming through the Planning Commission right now is some confusion about what the future holds in terms of development. Well, I'm telling everybody that we're going to make sure that this 2040 plan can be enacted in full. We're going to make sure that it happens. I'm telling investors that. I'm telling developers that. I'm telling people who need homes that. This is a really important plan that other cities around the country are presently trying to replicate. It's a plan that if you run the numbers out, we're seeing some good progress in terms of getting people homes. We're going to have both a judicial strategy as well as a legislative strategy to get this done, and get this done we will. Do you have anything to add?
It's hard to come after the mayor. He pretty much nailed it. There's not a predictability in the marketplace right now in the city. For developers who are interested in investing, you need to work with us and we will help you get through the uncertainties of the situation around the 2040 plan. But I think that's what the message is here. We've shown over the last decade and longer in my tenure with the city of working to get through some of these issues. We did this during the Great Recession when there was a lack of interest or inability to do development, and we got through that part too, and we'll continue to do that with uncertainties around 2040. But I think the mayor handled that question pretty well.
And just to be clear, I've already talked a lot about this already, but we're going to find a way to win this thing. We're going to win this thing. Whether it's a judicial strategy or a legislative one, we're going to make sure that we do what we need to do to ensure that people have homes in this city and that there's adequate supply.
You call Minneapolis a world-class city.
That's right.
Even now. So how do you get that word out beyond the Twin Cities and get businesses and companies and people who want to move here and set up shop here? How big of a challenge is that still in these last few years?
Well, it's always a challenge just because that there are major international events that are happening all over the world, and that's a bit repetitive, but there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot for news entities and the media to cover. Part of getting the word out about what's happening in Minneapolis and about the world-class nature of it is by holding press conferences. It's talking to all of you. It's telling not just our constituents, but stepping up and bragging about the incredible city that Minneapolis is nationwide. I can't tell you how many times I talk to other mayors around the country or other experts in the area of economic development and specifically housing that look to Minneapolis for some of the most forward-thinking proposals there are out there. 2040 plan is one example of it. And Minneapolis, I think, has shown that it's a city that has a great deal of durability and courage and guts. When you go through the few years that we have had, and you still come out with $1.5 billion worth of additional development and construction, what that shows is we don't quit. And what that shows is we've got the kind of consistency necessary to be that world-class city, because we might get knocked down 7 times in a week, but we're getting up 8.
Mayor, do you have any?
Yeah, you want to go?
I was going to add.
Go ahead, go. Yeah.
Just to add a little bit to that, I want to expand on the mayor's point about setting the tone. we've set a tone locally about inclusive development as well. So it's not just about attracting folks from the outside, although that we want folks to feel like this is a place where they have an economic future. We have great residents who can work for their businesses, but we've set a tone around inclusive development as well, local development as well. We've created some tools at the city to help that happen, to promote that. But if you look just, I'll speak for Ward 5. You look back in 2019, you're looking at $85 million worth in permits. Now you're looking this year, that number has doubled, right? And so we're 4 years past when everybody supposedly left the city and fled the city to elsewhere, and yet people are still here. People still want to grow their business here, not only locally, but folks are coming in from outside. So I think the word is getting out, and I think these numbers are a reflection of that. So.
In terms of the situation with the 2040 plan, do any of you have a sense of urgency or like a date that this needs to be solved by? Have you heard from some developers who are putting any heat on you in terms of getting this underway before they'll pull their trigger on their projects?
We've heard from quite a few developers that this is one very important fact that needs to be worked out before they go in and break ground or before they go in and sign a purchase agreement of some form. So yeah, it is important. Certainly, I can't give you the exact dates of the legislative calendar and when decisions are going to be made on the judicial front, but we also have a legislative session that's coming up very shortly here, and we hope to get some legislation passed in that session because, again, the ruling as it presently stands impacts not just Minneapolis, but impacts so many cities throughout the state because the ruling as it presently stands would have the city judge the total potential negative impact based on the total potential build-out. So, to give you a couple of examples that may be a bit exaggerated, you could have 100-story buildings downtown. Well, that's obviously not going to happen. You could have every single-family home in the entire city converted to a triplex. Well, if you look at the numbers, that's not happening. And so it doesn't make sense to judge based on the total potential build-out. It makes sense to judge based on what's realistic, because as mayor, I'm operating in the reality business, and that's just not reality, what they're talking about. So again, we've got a couple of potential strategies. Either way, we're going to win this thing in the end.
Are you happy with the way your attorney's office has argued the case so far?
Look, I'm a lawyer, but I'm also not operating within the specific realm of the 2040 plan as one. Yes, I am happy with the work that they've done. They've been fighting like crazy, and I think the briefs that they're putting up and the arguments that they're making are the right ones. I adamantly disagree with the ruling that the judge, however, made. Adamantly. They're doing a great job. I think the judge made a bad decision.
We can expect to see rent stabilization policy for rent control come up again. And I suspect maybe not even everyone up here agrees on the right strategy. But both of you kind of speak to how you see rent control or rent stabilization factor into the boom we've seen and whether it could be effective.
I appreciate the attempt to get us to disagree with each other up here. I think I can probably cite your position, and the council member Ellison supports it, and I don't. I think it's a fair disagreement to have, but what we're highlighting here is the work that is underway at the city and the work that has resulted in these $1.5 billion worth of permits.
So if it does happen, and do you see it impacting potential voters next year?
Go ahead.
It's a discussion that the city, small c, has maybe had, but it's not a discussion that we at the city enterprise have had, right? There's been some introductions. You guys have all tracked all of that. I think that the city council needs to have this discussion, right? What does a policy look like? You'll hear it if you travel around and talk to different cities. What you hear is that there are as many rent control policies as there are cities that have rent control, right? I don't see why that would be any different than for us, right? And so what exactly would be the particulars of a policy in Minneapolis? Well, that's no more predictable than what any other city's policy would have looked like before they had one, right? We've got to get this in front of council. We've got to have this discussion. The community needs to weigh in officially, not informally, as has happened in the past. And then we can start to actually vet what the potential cost benefit would be. So.
So, people talk about office
Let me just make sure I understand the question right. You're saying how much does new construction offset the decline in property value and thus the valuation and thus the property taxes of some of these other buildings? Cities are ever evolving. They need to change and they need to grow. And I think some of the changes that you've seen over these last several years in terms of remote work and therefore a decline in occupancy of these buildings was inevitable. But it got expedited by about 5 to 8 years by a global pandemic and COVID-19. And so, of course, there's an impact there. And what we in Minneapolis are doing, not just trying to do, but are doing, is offsetting that impact by being innovative and flexible. One of the ways we're being innovative and flexible is, for instance, with the North Star East building, which was converted from office space to residential and specifically affordable housing. We're going to be offering subsidies both at the city and we're going to be lobbying for subsidies at the state to do more of these conversions coming through and after this next legislative session. I think it's the cities that are not clinging white-knuckled to what once was, but are embracing the future that are ultimately going to be successful. And that's where we are right now in dealing with this. I'll note that it's these older buildings, the pre-World War II buildings, that are more conducive to a shift from commercial to residential. And we're looking to do that in several areas throughout downtown and specifically the warehouse district. So to answer your question, yes, it does offset some of the concern, but not all of it. So we're going to have to be as flexible as possible.
Has anybody approached you from the warehouse district? Because you mentioned that a few times, but I've not seen any proposals from the warehouse district yet.
No, I'm not aware of any proposals yet. The whole plan just got baked and is being baked out as we speak. And to shift a building from commercial to residential, there's oftentimes a gap between the value that would be received or the rent that would be received as a commercial building and that which would be received as a residential one. And so sometimes there's a gap where we have to kind of expedite this a little bit further along, and that's the case where we are now.
Chicago and I think New York have like big funds for this kind of thing, and they're being really aggressive on this. Is the city thinking about doing a fund like
Yeah, well, we also have funds available here at the city that we're looking to utilize. It's going to take more than city money alone. I'll tell you what has happened in some of these other cities like D.C. is the bottom has fallen out faster. And so D.C., for instance, a ton of the buildings are governmental owned. And needless to say, the government isn't coming in very much like the city of Minneapolis is. We come in. The federal government has not been as much. Because of that, they've got office buildings and an older office stock. The buildings are older there. They aren't glass skyscrapers, but you can open the window, making them more conducive to a shift to residential that enables them to make that transition. So we're in the process right now of, again, trying to encourage and incentivize owners to do exactly that. And I think you're going to see more and more over this next year.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.